What language the Pelasgians used I cannot with certainty affirm, but if I may form a conjecture from those Pelasgians who now exist, and inhabit the town of Crestona above the Tyrrhenians, and from those Pelasgians settled at Placia and Silis on the Hellespont, they spoke a barbarous language. And if the whole Pelasgian body did so, the Attic race, being Pelasgic, must at the time they changed into Hellenes have altered their language. The Hellenic race, however, appears to have used the same language from the time they became a people. At first insignificant, yet from a small beginning they have increased to a multitude of nations, chiefly by a union with many other barbarous nations. But the Pelasgic race, being barbarous, never increased to any great extent. Of these nations Croesus learnt that the Attic was oppressed and distracted by Pisistratus, then reigning in Athens. When a quarrel happened between those who dwelt on the sea coast and the Athenians, the former headed by Megacles, the latter by Lycurgus, Pisistratus, aiming at the sovereign power, formed a third party, and having assembled his partisans under colour of protecting those of the mountains, he contrived this stratagem. He wounded himself and his mules, drove his chariot into the public square, as if he had escaped from enemies that designed to murder him in his way to the country, and besought the people to grant him a guard, having before acquired renown in the expedition against Megara, by taking its port, Nice, and displaying other illustrious deeds. The people of Athens, deceived by this, gave him such of the citizens as he selected, who were not to be his javelin men, but club-bearers, for they attended him with clubs of wood. These men, joining in revolt with Pisistratus, seized the Acropolis, and Pisistratus assumed the government of the Athenians, neither disturbing the existing magistracies, nor altering the laws, but he administered the government according to the established institutions, liberally and well. Not long after, the partisans of Megacles and Lycurgus became reconciled and drove him out. In this manner Pisistratus first made himself master of Athens, and, his power not being firmly rooted, lost it. But those who expelled Pisistratus quarrelled anew with one another, and Megacles, harassed by the sedition, sent a herald to Pisistratus to ask if he was willing to marry his daughter, on condition of having the sovereignty. Pisistratus, having accepted the proposal and agreed to his terms, in order to his restitution, they contrived the most ridiculous project that, I think, was ever imagined, especially if we consider that the Greeks have from old been distinguished from the barbarians as being more acute and free from all foolish simplicity, and more particularly as they played this trick upon the Athenians, who are esteemed among the wisest of the Greeks. In the Paeonian tribe was a woman named Fire, 4 cubits high, wanting 3 fingers, and in other respects handsome. This woman they dressed in a complete suit of armor, placed her on a chariot, and having shown her beforehand how to assume the most becoming demeanor, they drove her to the city, with heralds before, who, on their arrival in the city, proclaimed what was ordered in these terms: O Athenians, receive with kind wishes Pisistratus, whom Minerva herself, honoring above all men, now conducts back to her own citadel. The report was presently spread among the people that Minerva was bringing back Pisistratus, and the people in the city, believing this woman to be the goddess, both adored a human being, and received Pisistratus. Pisistratus, having recovered the sovereignty in the manner above described, married the daughter of Megacles in accordance with his agreement, but Pisistratus, soon hearing of designs that were being formed against him, withdrew entirely out of the country, and arriving in Eretria, consulted with his sons. The opinion of Hippias prevailing, to recover the kingdom, they immediately began to collect contributions from those cities which felt any gratitude to them for benefits received, and though many gave large sums, the Thebans surpassed the rest in liberality. At length, not to give a detailed account, time passed, and everything was ready for their return, for Argive mercenaries arrived from Peloponnesus, and a man of Naxos, named Lygdames, who had come as a volunteer, and brought both men and money, showed great zeal in the cause. Setting out from Eretria, they came back in the 11th year of their exile, and first of all possessed themselves of Marathon. While they lay encamped in this place, their partisans from the city joined them, and others from the various districts, to whom a tyranny was more welcome than liberty, crowded to them. The Athenians of the city, on the other hand, had shown very little concern all the time Pisistratus was collecting money, or even when he took possession of Marathon. But when they heard that he was marching from Marathon against the city, they at length went out to resist him, and marched with their whole force against the invaders. In the meantime Pisistratus's party advanced towards the city, and arrived in a body at the temple of the Pallenian Minerva, and there took up their position. Here Amphilytus, a prophet of Acarnania, moved by divine impulse, approached Pisistratus, and pronounced this oracle in hexameter verse. The cast is thrown, the net expanded wide. At night the tunnies in the snare will glide. He, inspired by the god, uttered this prophecy, and Pisistratus, comprehending the oracle, and saying he accepted the omen, led on his army. The Athenians of the city were then engaged at their breakfast, and some of them after breakfast had betaken themselves to dice, others to sleep, so that the army of Pisistratus, falling upon them by surprise, soon put them to flight. As they were flying, Pisistratus contrived a clever stratagem to prevent their rallying again, and forced them thoroughly to disperse. He mounted his sons on horseback and sent them forward. They, overtaking the fugitives, spoke as they were ordered by Pisistratus, bidding them be of good cheer, and to depart every man to his own home. The Athenians yielded a ready obedience, and thus Pisistratus, having a third time possessed himself of Athens, secured his power more firmly, both by the aid of auxiliary forces, and by revenues partly collected at home and partly drawn from the mines along the river Strymon. He seized as hostages the sons of the Athenians who had held out against him, and had not immediately fled, and settled them at Naxos. He moreover purified the island of Delos, in obedience to an oracle, and having dug up the dead bodies, as far as the prospect from the temple reached, he removed them to another part of Delos. Croesus was informed that such was, at that time, the condition of the Athenians, and that the Lacedaemonians, having extricated themselves out of great difficulties, had gained the mastery over the Chians in war. They had formerly been governed by the worst laws of all the people in Greece, both as regarded their dealings with one another, and in holding no intercourse with strangers. But they changed to a good government in the following manner: Lycurgus, a man much esteemed by the Spartans, having arrived at Delphi to consult the oracle, no sooner entered the temple, than the Pythian spoke as follows. Lycurgus, thou art come to my rich fane, beloved by Zeus and all the heavenly train. But whether god or man I fear to say, yet god thou must be more than mortal clay. Some men say that, besides this, the Pythian also communicated to him that form of government now established among the Spartans. But, as the Lacedaemonians themselves affirm, Lycurgus being appointed guardian to his nephew Leobotis, king of Sparta, brought those institutions from Crete. For as soon as he had taken the guardianship, he altered all their customs, and took care that no one should transgress them. Afterwards he established military regulations, and instituted the ephori and senators. Thus, having changed their laws, they established good institutions in their stead. They erected a temple to Lycurgus after his death, and held him in the highest reverence. As they had a good soil and abundant population, they quickly sprang up and flourished. And now they were no longer content to live in peace, but proudly considering themselves superior to the Arcadians, they sent to consult the oracle at Delphi, touching the conquest of the whole country of the Arcadians, and the Pythian gave them this answer: Dost thou ask of me Arcadia? Thou askest a great deal, I cannot grant it thee. There are many acorn-eating men in Arcadia, who will hinder thee. But I do not grudge thee all, I will give thee Tegea to dance on with beating of the feet, and a fair plain to measure out by the rod. When the Lacedaemonians heard this answer reported, they laid aside their design against all Arcadia, and relying on an equivocal oracle, led an army against Tegea only, carrying fetters with them, as if they would surely reduce the Chians to slavery. But being defeated in an engagement, as many of them as were taken alive, were compelled to work, wearing the fetters they had brought, and measuring the lands of the Chians with a rod. Those fetters in which they were bound, were, even in my time, preserved in Tegea, suspended around the temple of Helene Minerva. In the first war, therefore, they had constantly fought against the Chians with ill success, but in the time of Croesus, and during the reign of Xandrides and Ariston at Lacedaemon, they at length became superior in the following manner: when they had always been worsted in battle by the Chians, they sent to inquire of the oracle at Delphi what god they should propitiate, in order to become victorious over the Chians. The Pythian answered, they should become so, when they had brought back the bones of Orestes the son of Agamemnon. But as they were unable to find the sepulchre of Orestes, they sent again to inquire of the god in what spot Orestes lay interred, and the Pythian gave this answer to the inquiries of those who came to consult her. Down in Arcadia's level plain I know Tegea lies, and where woe lies on woe. Where two bound winds impatient of the yoke are forced to blow, where stroke replies to stroke. Beneath the earth lies Agamemnon's son. Bear him to Sparta and Tegea's won. When the Lacedaemonians heard this, they were as far off the discovery as ever, though they searched everywhere, till Lycus, one of the Spartans who are called Agathoagi, found it. These Agathoagi consist of citizens who are discharged from serving in the cavalry, such as are senior, 5 in every year. It is their duty during the year in which they are discharged from the cavalry, not to remain inactive, but go to different places where they are sent by the Spartan Commonwealth. Lycus, who was one of these persons, discovered it in Tegea, both meeting with good fortune and employing sagacity. For as the Lacedaemonians had at that time intercourse with the Chians, he, coming to a smithy, looked attentively at the iron being forged, and was struck with wonder when he saw what was done. The smith, perceiving his astonishment, desisted from his work, and said, O Laconian stranger, you would certainly have been astonished had you seen what I saw, since you are so surprised at the working of iron. For as I was endeavoring to sink a well in this enclosure, in digging, I came to a coffin 7 cubits long, and because I did not believe that men were ever taller than they now are, I opened it and saw that the body was equal to the coffin in length, and after I had measured it, I covered it up again. The man told him what he had seen, and Lycus, reflecting on what was said, conjectured from the words of the oracle, that this must be the body of Orestes, forming his conjecture on the following reasons: seeing the smith's 2 bellows, he discerned in them the 2 winds, and in the anvil and hammer the stroke answering to stroke, and in the iron that was being forged the woe that lay on woe, representing it in this way, that iron had been invented to the injury of man. He then returned to Sparta, and gave the Lacedaemonians an account of the whole matter, but they brought a feigned charge against him and sent him into banishment. He, going back to Tegea, related his misfortune to the smith, and wished to hire the enclosure from him, but he would not let it. But in time, when he had persuaded him, he took up his abode there, and having opened the sepulchre and collected the bones, he carried them away with him to Sparta. From that time, whenever they made trial of each other's strength, the Lacedaemonians were by far superior in war, and the greater part of Peloponnesus had been already subdued by them.